Everyone was waiting for the explosive moment of the Forrester Creations launch, an event that was supposed to redefine the brand's image after years of turmoil. But at that moment, as all the lights focused on the main aisle, as Steffi stood in the CEO's chair, her introductory speech firmly in hand, a movement from behind the wings made the entire room stop breathing. Thomas appeared, his smile confident but his eyes filled with fire, and beside him, Quinn, the woman who had been banished from this very place, stepped out with the proud air of someone reborn from the ashes. Amidst the constant flashing of cameras, Thomas took her hand, raised it high in the white light, and announced something that shattered every sound in the room. "We are a couple." The words rang out like an explosion that destroyed the entire space. Steffi was stunned, her lips parted, but no words came out. Before her eyes, she saw not just her brother holding the hand of the woman who had caused their family so much pain, but also the betrayal of everything she had fought to protect. In the audience, phones lit up, social media exploded, and journalists scrambled to capture this historic moment, a moment that could make or break the Forrester legacy. Ridge stood backstage, his face hard. He saw not just a scandal, but the collapse of the order he had spent his life building. Eric, who had just recovered from a serious illness, sat in the front row. Shock washed over him when he realized that the woman holding his nephew's hand was Quinn, his former wife, the woman who had torn their family apart. The image was like a knife to his old heart, where scars that had healed bled again. He saw old memories flooding back, forgivenesses, betrayals, promises crushed under the heel of time. And now, with Quinn back, not just as a woman she loved, but as a symbol of chaos, he understood that tonight was not just a fashion show, it was a public battle between past and present. Steffi stepped onto the stage, trying to maintain composure, but inside, her heart was pounding like an alarm. She knew the consequences: media scrutiny, investor skepticism, clients questioning whether Forrester Creations was still a brand of elegance or a stage for sexual antics. Her eyes flickered to Thomas, whom she had believed had grown up, overcome the darkness in his mind, but now there he was, holding the hand of the woman who had brought his father to his knees. Thomas looked straight into the camera, his smile not just a symbol of rebellion, but also a declaration of freedom. He believed he was in love, that his feelings for Quinn were real, that he had the right to live his life on his own terms, not confined by the moral boundaries set by his family. But there was a quiet fear inside him, a fear that he was becoming another version of Ridge, a man driven by desire and error. Quinn, in the moment the light touched her face, felt a cold shiver. She had dreamed of this day, the day she would return, see those who had rejected her witness her triumph. But now, between Eric's stunned gaze, Steffi's contempt, and Ridge's silence, she realized this victory tasted bitter. She had wanted love, wanted forgiveness, but now all she had was a glowing stage built on the ashes of trust. When the show ended, the auditorium erupted like a beehive. The press swarmed the hallways, the phones rang, and Steffi faced her biggest crisis since running Forrester. Investors wanted answers, and PR people sought damage control. Ridge, in his backroom office, stood staring at the giant poster on the wall, where Forrester, Elegance Reborn, now read sarcastically. He knew things had gotten out of hand. Eric walked in, leaning on a cane, his eyes sad but hard. He knew his family had always lived between triumph and tragedy, that love and betrayal were two sides of the same coin. But this time, everything was different. He couldn't tell who was wrong and who was pitiful. He looked at Quinn, the woman who had broken him but also saved him from loneliness, and at Thomas, the grandson who had once been his pride and now a symbol of instability. There was a deep fear in Eric's eyes that the Forresters themselves were entering a cycle of self-destruction again. Steffi sat alone in the dark conference room, the light from her phone illuminating her conflicted face. She read every article, every comment, every hashtag that mentioned the Forrester name along with the words scandal, betrayal, disaster. She felt the fatigue creep into her muscles, but the fire still burned inside. She would not let a woman like Quinn drag the family down again. She knew this fight would be about more than just reputation, but about control, the right to decide who deserved to stand on the stage and who should be pushed out forever. Thomas, meanwhile, was reveling in the freedom he believed he had just won. He felt loved, alive, challenging the world. But in the quiet moments, when the lights went down and the noise of the crowd faded, he felt empty. He looked in the mirror and saw his own reflection, a man who had risked everything to protect love, but wasn't sure that love was enough to save him from isolation. Quinn returned to the old mansion that had once been her and Eric's home. The house was silent, the paintings on the walls following her every step. She stood before the piano where Eric had played for her and felt tears well up in her eyes, without knowing why. Was it regret? Or simply the realization that what she had gained could never replace what she had lost? The next day, the media carried pictures of Eric leaving the hospital, along with a brief press release. Forrester Creations is reviewing the roles of all members of the company. Beneath the caption was a photo of Eric standing on the stairs, his gaze distant, while behind him, a large banner with Quinn and Thomas's faces faded into the sunlight. The story spread and public opinion was divided. Some praised Thomas for his courage in being honest, others criticized Forrester for losing his soul. But for those involved, the truth was simpler and more cruel. No one really won. Steffi faced a media storm and the fear that she was losing control. Ridge was torn between protecting his family and protecting his brand. Eric faced the ghosts of his past resurrected in the company he had built with blood and tears. And Quinn, who had been looking for love, now became a symbol of chaos. At night, the city glowed like blood flowing through the underground. In the empty room, Steffi stood before the window, looking down at the street, the car headlights reflecting in her cold eyes. She knew there would be an emergency meeting tomorrow, and painful decisions would be made. She would have to choose between family and company, between loyalty and survival. Far away, in Quinn's apartment, Thomas sat on the sofa, his head on her shoulder. The dim light illuminated their faces, two souls bound in the same wound. Both believed they were in love, but they didn't realize that love was destroying everything they touched. In Forrester, Eric sat in his study, the pen falling from his hand, his eyes on an old family photograph. Was love always the enemy of legacy? He wondered. That every time a Forrester's heart fluttered, the empire was torn anew? And in that silence, the final question rang out, quiet, painful, like the tearing of fabric in the night. Can Forrester Creations survive when its own blood no longer knows what love is, what power is, and what betrayal lurks in the spotlight? The lights of Forrester Creations blazed in the afternoon, as if the entire building were trying to conceal a storm brewing inside. Carter walked down the hallway, his steps echoing in the silence, where glances swept past him, curious and skeptical. He had sworn to leave the past behind, the forbidden affair with Quinn, the nights of longing and guilt, the struggles between morality and passion. But now fate had drawn him back, not with a phone call, but with Quinn's name appearing on all the internal bulletins, along with a new, unexpected connection. She was becoming Douglas's future stepmother. Thomas watched from afar, his eyes as cold as storm water. He said nothing, but inside, jealousy smoldered like a hidden fire. He had believed that his love for Quinn could erase all prejudice, could make the world see him as a grown man, no longer dominated by the shadows of the past. But now, seeing Carter, the man who had lain in her arms, still walking beside her, still the one she turned to in times of crisis, Thomas understood that he had never truly had her. Quinn's love, like light reflected on water, slipped away the more she held on. Quinn, in the midst of public opinion, remained calm. She knew the rumors were spreading, that Carter had signed the modeling contract that had restored her, that he had secretly used his legal power to reopen the door the company had once closed in her face. To the media, it was a compelling story, a woman once abandoned, now restored to her former glory thanks to the man who had been her secret lover. But to Forrester, it was an earthquake. Steffi held an emergency meeting, Ridge was silent, and Eric, still weak from his treatment, looked at the contract documents with trembling hands. Beneath Carter's perfect signature was a line of approval he had added himself, a clause allowing Quinn to return as a consulting designer. No one knew how it had happened, only that it had been signed unusually quickly and that Carter had somehow bypassed the board's vetting process. Thomas began to have doubts. He felt betrayed twice, once by the woman he loved, and once by a friend he had once trusted. His jealousy was making him lose sight of himself. He tried to find reasons to believe that Carter was acting professionally, that he had no romantic intentions, but every time he saw Quinn and Carter exchange glances in the hallway, his heart clenched, like he was witnessing a silent crack widening in the fragile wall of trust. Carter was caught between two worlds. He knew all the eyes were on him, knew that signing that contract had put him in a dangerous position, but he couldn't deny that part of him still wanted to see Quinn on stage, still wanted to see the light in her eyes when she was recognized again. He told himself it was only fair, that she deserved a second chance, but deep down, he knew it was a feeling he thought he'd buried. Quinn, meanwhile, was far from naive. She knew her return was unwelcome. Every move was scrutinized, every look was meaningful. She understood that Thomas was beginning to distance himself, that his gaze, once warm and protective, had turned suspicious. But she also knew that Carter was still the only one who understood her to the core, the one who knew her not just as a schemer, but as a woman who had paid too much for her mistakes. At the next day's internal meeting, when the contract leaks broke, the air in the room felt drained of oxygen. Steffi demanded an explanation from Carter, and Rich looked at him as if to lay bare his every thought. Carter answered in a calm voice, but there was a deep weariness in his eyes. He didn't deny signing the contract, but he didn't justify it either. He only said one short sentence in the meeting minutes, that he believed in human ingenuity and the right to make a fresh start. The words, instead of soothing, caused everyone to explode with suspicion. Thomas left the room first. His footsteps echoed down the hallway like a warning. He couldn't accept that Carter was the one who brought Quinn back. A dark thought formed in his mind. Had Quinn ever truly chosen him, or was she just looking for the man who made her feel safe? Every time he remembered the moment Quinn touched Carter's hand at the press conference, his heart clenched, and the admiration he once had for Carter turned to the cold fire of betrayal in his eyes. That night, Carter sat in his office, alone, looking at the contract on the screen. The light from the computer reflected off his face, highlighting the tired lines around his eyes. He knew he was on the line, not just of his career, but of his self-respect. Every line in the contract reminded him of the times he and Quinn had spent together, the sinful nights he never dared to recall. And now he wondered, was he really signing this contract out of justice, or because his heart had never been healed? Across town, Quinn couldn't sleep either. She sat in front of the mirror, her eyes reflecting the image of a woman who had been through too much pain to believe in miracles. She thought of Thomas, thought of Carter, thought of the way both men had looked at her, one as a symbol of desire, the other as an unhealed wound. She realized that, even though she had returned, she still couldn't escape the past. The price of resurrection was being caught between two men who represented two worlds, love and redemption. Eric, the only one sane enough to see what was happening, sat silently in his old office. He knew Quinn would never come back without a plan, and Carter, with his heart too honest, was always the easy prey. But he also knew that neither of them was completely wrong. Everything that was happening was the result of old ties that had never been broken. He looked at the family photo hanging on the wall, where Thomas and Carter had once stood side by side, and wondered if Forrester was becoming a place where love always turned into a battlefield. In the days that followed, the gossip continued. A photo of Carter and Quinn appearing in the same frame spread across the internet. A major fashion magazine carried the headline, "A woman returns from the shadows, thanks to her ex." Thomas saw the article in his office, clutching his phone until his hands were empty. In that moment, he knew he was no longer in control of the story. Quinn was now the focus, and Carter, unwillingly, was being dragged into the role of the villain in a new tragedy. While everything outside exploded, inside Forrester, an eerie silence spread. Meetings were tense. People began to choose sides. Steffi wants to end Quinn's influence, Ridge wants to keep the peace, and Eric is torn between compassion and fear of the past repeating itself. Carter, in the middle of it all, no longer knows where he belongs. On a weekend night, Thomas goes to the design studio where Quinn is working late. He stands outside the door and sees Carter walk in. No one says anything, but the look between Carter and Quinn says it all. Thomas turns away, his shadow fading into the hallway, his heart no longer filled with jealousy, but despair. He realizes that some people never really leave each other, no matter how many years, no matter how many mistakes have passed. It rains all night. Forrester is immersed in dim light and the wind whistling through the glass. Carter sits alone, looking at the company files on the table, and realizes that he is facing not only the risk of losing his job, but also losing himself again. Love, in Forrester's world, is never just love. It's always transactional. It's power, the sweet weapon everyone fears but still throws themselves into. Outside,